Rosensweig Show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm very happy to have you here. We have a very special show today. It's a little bit out of the ordinary podcast that we do on Sunday afternoons. As you know from previous podcasts, the Avrum Rosensweig Show has a reporter in Israel, a reporter extraordinaire, whose name is Devorah Mason. Devorah is here with us today. Devorah, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm wonderful. Thank you.
Good.
And Devorah is an adventuresome individual who has been living in Israel for a number of years, originally a Torontonian, and she travels up and down, north and south, um, to determine exactly where our country, Israel, is at in terms of the people who have been affected by October 7th and afterwards. In fact, most recently, as of February 20th, actually, she was in the north with many different types of groups of people, including entrepreneurs, government officials, and so on, meeting with individuals who have been evacuated, and companies who are trying to return to what would have been normal. Now, this was preceded by two trips, actually, to the south, one of which we reported on, and again, with a similar mission. So let's cut right to the chase and welcome Devorah, our reporter in Israel. Thank you very much for joining us, Devorah, and for initiating this. I'm very grateful.
Thank you. Thanks, Avram, for having patience during this crazy time. It's kind of hard for us to get online together at different time zones and each one with their own schedule. But I'm glad we got a chance to do this
Yeah,
now.
no, that's okay. Give us a bit of your background in a couple sentences so people have a sense of who you are. You live in Jerusalem, you have kids. What takes you to these different places around Israel?
Well, I think I'm very Zionistic to a fault. I always say to people, I'm the only person in this room who has made Aliyah, moved to Israel twice. So the first time you make Aliyah, you don't really know what you're in for, so you can give that excuse.
Mhm.
But if you come back again, then you know you're coming back, what you're coming back to. My parents have always been Zionistic. I moved to Israel in 1990 for the first time as a teenager. Did my high school years in Israel and Jerusalem during a very difficult time, the Gulf War, Russian Aliyah, the Intifada in Jerusalem. It was a difficult time, and Jerusalem wasn't the city it is today. It was hard to grow up there, and I remember even going to the Ministry of the Interior when I moved to Israel, and they said to me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Canada." And they said, "Why are you here? Go home." Like, I said, "Well,
Mhm.
I am home," but that was it's hard for them to understand why North Americans would be moving or leaving North America. Today, I think we have a better sense of that. And then I left and went back to Toronto, did university there, got married, and four of my kids were born in Toronto. And we didn't want them to have to come as teenagers the way I had to experience Aliyah. And so we moved with my oldest still in finishing first grade. And when we came to Israel, my fifth was born here. I'm a single mother for many, many years. So, I've had the opportunity and the I guess you could say the blessing to raise five kids here in Israel with a great co-parent. But I think that the second time around, I was already more fluent in Hebrew. I was more aware of what's happening here, and I kind of just got myself into the tech world and started to build up my career through that. And I worked for startups, innovation programs, had a consulting company, joined us, different. I worked in different themes across as well, and then with COVID, I kind of closed my company, pivoted into another company, and a few years ago, I joined the tech investment world. So that's where I am today. And I have family here, and I see that my family has come and gone over the years, moving abroad for a few years, coming back. I have a brother in Texas, but overall, today I live in Jerusalem, and my firm that I work for has offices in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, in the north, in New York, and in the south. So definitely, I work in a firm that has that is that works with my vision and my mission, which is to work on bringing developing tech in Israel, bringing investments into tech in Israel, and also helping to do economic development across Israel to help the economy thrive and grow and bring companies into the global market. That's my mission.
Devorah, in Canada, which is where you stem from, I would say that the overall emotion that most of us feel, if this is emotion indeed, is one of safety and security, right? The main filter that we have as Canadians, we're comfortable, we're safe. What's the main filter that you have as an Israeli?
So, firstly, I have to say, I feel safe in Israel. I feel very safe. I
Yeah.
actually feel more safe every time I come back. I travel a lot. I travel almost every month. I was recently in the US last month, and I every time I land back in Israel, I feel safe. I'm so happy to be here. I feel a sense of security and safety being in Israel. So definitely, I think that is, this we've have that same emotion, and I know a lot of people lost their sense of security and safety after October 7th. But I still see Israel as being my, my home, my place where I feel secure. Um, I think Israelis are, why they always say, why does the tech market so successful? Why is innovation such a big part of our lives? And I think in a large part it's because the country is a lot of times been in survival mode. Having to find solutions to things that would otherwise, be solved, in other ways across, in the global market, people solve them other ways. Sometimes even just money or space or, a lot not being surrounded by enemies. And in Israel, I think that we've had to find solutions. I think the first drone was created by, there's this innovation museum here in Israel, and the first drone ever was created by someone who wanted to be able to see over the border gate, but didn't know how to do it. So there were these boys who, for their bar mitzvahs, they get these gifts of like the electric airplanes, like this and the airplane goes, and he attached his video camera to the bottom of the airplane and took it from this kid, this bar mitzvah kid, and flew it like that, over the gate to be able to get videos of something that that today's drones do. So that's innovation, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's it. So obviously we're much more sophisticated than that. I think that was in the 70s. Okay, but if you go through the innovation, you see the things that have developed, definitely unique. And then the people themselves, oftentimes, 19, 20-year olds in Canada, they get a degree that doesn't solve much for them in their lives and doesn't give them much direction. Here, when there's mandatory service in the army, so many of them are coming out of intelligence units, and they're coming out with skills at the age of 20 and 21 that is helping them to grow their next startup, to understand the world of cyber and innovation, entrepreneurship, tech. There was one of our companies, we were just talking about this. They had worked in a secret unit, in the army, and they worked in sensors, IoT sensors, and so their company that they developed later on was sensors for solving bugs and mites that go into trees and affect trees. Through this technology, they're saving forestry.
Hmm.
It's amazing to see these things. So, so survival leads us to create, to be innovative. And that's the Israeli mentality. And one of the things I mentioned to you before is that I feel like the country overall has become a social, maybe socialist. I don't know if I should say so, but a socially based run country since October 7th. So much of what's happening in the country is being done by private organizations, by private individuals, by donors, by people who are strong leaders who are just taking that lead and making
Yes.
things happen without waiting around.
Just before we dive into your actual trips, because that really is the compelling part of this interview, I believe. In the central part of Israel, I think generally people who live in Jerusalem and thereabouts probably feel safer after October 7th and even prior than those living in the south and the north. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, well, I think people in the South have, for the most part, moved out of those areas for now, either because they've been destroyed. There's, a lack of security or lack of safety. Not all regions and not all people, but definitely I think that's happened quite a bit. And in the north, they've evacuated many of the residents, whether it was against their will or, with their complicity, but in general, moving them uh, to areas outside of those border cities and and border communities. And so that's right by the borders, and definitely they don't feel safe. And I think that that's part of why they're away. They've been evacuated or they're not going back. But then there's also the regions that are in the line of fire. Well, I remember one time when I was in the south, I saw rockets overhead, and you get notifications. We have an app that tells us which region, based on the trajectory of the rocket, which region should go into their safe rooms. And I could see all of these regions in the south, and then areas on the coast, and they all have to constantly running into their safe rooms. Many times they're sleeping there with their kids overnight. We've I mean that doesn't create a sense of safety. But Jerusalem has its other challenges. So it's a blended city. There, when you talk about East and West Jerusalem, there's not a border. It's a street. You cross the street, and now
Yes.
you're in East Jerusalem. You
Yes.
cross the street back. Now you're in West Jerusalem. So it's a blended city, and so there are oftentimes people who are going to perpetrate attacks on other civilians in the city, and that's really difficult as Jerusalemites to feel okay about that, or feel safe when those things are happening.
Devora, in the north, indeed, there have been people who have been evacuated. I interviewed Lvov Weinberg 2 weeks ago, who was the previous president of Israel Hockey. And once
Ooh.
October, yeah, he's a fascinating fellow. Once October 7th happened, his wife and his son, I believe, went to Haifa to live with their family, in-laws. And I wondered to myself, although it's clearly safer, and when you're a parent, that's what you want to do with your kids, is to make sure that they're not under attack. But in terms of the evacuees, is there any shame in leaving their home?
So I feel like I've heard such a wide range of stories. You know how there's not one emotion, there's not one answer. It's a good question. Maybe I'll just share a couple stories just to give a bit of a sense of like people and their emotions they've shared. One person, he was in the task force, the defense force of a place in the south called Nativa Sarah, and soon after defending their community, and many people were killed, but after a couple, I think it was about 24, 48 hours of defending their community, he packed his kids up and family into 3 cars, and he said it reminded him of the Holocaust, where he put each one in a different car, not knowing if all the cars would make it, but that someone from his family should survive. But he didn't mention that to them. He just said, "Oh, here's room in this car. Sit here. Here's room in the," and then taking them out of there. And they went to Tel Aviv or to Haifa to their family. And we asked them, "Will you come back?" I mean, this community is stunning. All these gorgeous homes, right on the border, right by the border crossing, where they used to also, all of them used to go and pick up Palestinians from Gaza to bring them in for medical care into the country. So they're right there. And I said to him, "Would you go back?" And he said, "I won't go back if my kids won't go back." And one of his kids are adamant about not going back. So, he in the meantime is still defending the community and living there. And, they're him and another, I think another, like a big group of soldiers and so on are there in that community defending it. But his family hasn't come back. And that was about a month ago or a month and a half ago. So, I don't know what has changed. Obviously, life is dynamic.
Right.
That's one story. Another story is someone, a famous news persona who, she had lived south by the border and in one of these yeshuvim. I'm also not giving too much details. I don't think it's fair to share more than that. But
Right.
and there was only one couple, an older elderly couple, who went back and moved back into their home in that yeshuv, in that community, and they said, "This is our home. This is all we know. We're going home, and what will be will be." And they were the only ones. And some young people started to join that community as well because they were interested in working in the factories. They were in the agriculture. Younger people are, a little bit, they're better soldiers than us old people who, are a little bit more risk averse. And there are still tunnels underneath that they don't know of. And although it wasn't in the news, there's an infiltration through one of those tunnels into that community since October 7th, with that couple living there, the soldiers, and obviously it was stopped. But that doesn't create a sense of security and for the people, because they know about it. The people who are from that community know about it, heard
Yes.
about it, and it's going to be very hard. And they said we're not going back at this point. Doesn't mean that there won't be people who will go back. Doesn't mean that they won't be able to resettle it. But it's a lot of work right now in getting people to feel safe again.
I think it's certainly beyond me, and I'm sure it's beyond most people as to what it means to evacuate your home, your city or your village, your area that you live in for so many years. If you have kids in particular, that means, where do you take them to the doctor, God forbid, if they need it?
Yeah.
If you have dental problems, who is your dentist? In Livov's case, his family's way out in Haifa. That's not their home. They're from Metula. So the germ
Avram,
the
I
germ
have to. Yeah, sorry, I have to just tell you something, because like it just came. A lot of the hotels have become the homes of these evacuees.
yes.
Sometimes I walk by a hotel and I'll see a little kid's doll sitting in the window because that's their home now. You don't usually see that in regular hotels because
No, you
people are
don't.
transit, like they transit, they come in, they go, and I was just thinking about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, you buttressed my point very well. It's just so dramatic. If someone insisted that I leave my home here and had to go many miles away, or kilometers, how would I adjust to that? So, listen, this is a really good segue to launch into the treks, the journeys that you have made over the last couple months, to both the southern part of Israel as well as the north. Um, so I want to turn this over to you. We actually have a picture presentation, as obviously as well as narrative behind that with Devora. And let's start in the south. You went on December 24th to Sderot, Zakim, Kfar Aza, right? And you basically did a walkthrough of what had happened there, and you also met with soldiers, and subsequently at the end of the trip had a barbecue. We did report on that a little bit. Do you just want to give us a synopsis of that trip, and then take us into your January 14th trip in the south?
Yeah. So one of the reasons I go, first of all, I feel like it's important for me to go wherever, uh, everywhere in Israel. Like I don't want to be limited. I don't want to feel limited, and that's something I kind of learned from my grandmothers. Anyways, I remember when I first moved back to Israel. At one point, I was feeling a little bit scared, and one of my grandmothers said to me, I used to feel scared, and then I realized I can't fear anything but God, and that way I lived my life much more peacefully.
Okay,
So I tried to implement that in my life.
very good.
It's definitely very useful. Um, and I want to be able to go places because, as I mentioned to you, around like these things are trend, like a lot of the places, let's say, and God forbid, I mean, the camps in Europe and so on, they created museums around them and so on. But anyone who saw it right after, they were witnesses, and they had the responsibility, I guess I would say, to witness, as the responders and as the liberators and so on. I'm not a responder and I'm not a liberator, but I did get to hear the stories from first responders themselves as they took us through different areas in the South and showed us a lot of the atrocities that were, the remnants of what the battle looked like, and telling us their firsthand stories,
Yes.
because they were first responders. And that was something that, in 2 years from now, won't be there. God willing, things will come back, and people will come back, and we'll reopen and relive and bring back the vitality of those regions. But right now, I felt like it was my responsibility, and it was like my right to go and to witness that, because it's I'm here. It's my generation. Unfortunately, like we're here.
Take
Um,
us through those trips down south. Maybe we should do the pictorials right now.
yeah, you want to do that? Okay,
Yeah.
let me do
Yeah.
that. Just a minute. So I'm going to share that.
I'm just wondering, while you're setting that up, were you frightened what you
No,
were about to see?
no, no. I don't feel. I mean, like that. I don't know if it's a good thing, but I don't generally feel fear, um, for better or for worse.
Except for God.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so tell me if you can see this.
Yeah,
So
I
this
can
was,
see it.
the first time we went, they made us put on these, jackets and helmets and walk through, and I took a picture of the fruit trees because there was something to me. There's something to me in general always about the way nature thrives when humans destroy.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so, I just kept walking through and noticing this beautiful greenery.
What area are we looking at now?
So right now we're in Kfar Aza. So look at the sky. I mean, look at this. Like we're walking through devastation, and this is the border. There's
You know,
different markings on the houses. Um, I'm just going to go through because I don't think families always want to see their. Um,
Devor, I don't know what October 7th was like itself in terms of the weather, but I often thought when I was reading Holocaust literature, one thing said on an awful day, a rainy day, or a snowy day, how terrible it must have been for the people in the camps. But sometimes I think to myself, how terrible it must have been for the people in the camps when the sky was blue. You could hear the
right?
birds. Yeah, right,
Like
right,
you don't feel human, but
right.
there's like there's some sort of like that. It's like that nature of life and life that keeps going on. So this was, they walked us through. This is an area where a lot of the people, the younger, you can see the signs on the houses that they put. If someone was kidnapped, they wrote, from this house, so and so was kidnapped. If someone was killed, they write from this house, so and so was killed. Um, and this was the younger area. This is where all the younger people lived. Is in a kibbutz. When you reach 18, you have the right to a piece of land, and so they would give them. But they wanted to live around the young people, so they would give them this land. And some of these people afterwards, I went back and I sort of like started to research and look them up and see who is this person, who is that person. Like, I wanted to read more about them. Like this guy, he had beer bottles on his doorstep, and the families had asked us not to come in. So I went back and researched to see why. And it was this joke that the friends had that anytime they sat down, I think there were 8 beer bottles. He could always drink 8 beer bottles in one sitting, which they were very impressed by. For Canadians, that's not impressive, but it's,
Right.
so like, and so you just go through, and then I see this fruit tree, and I'm just like, all the fruits are falling on the ground. No one's picking them. No one's eating them. So, anyways, this was the younger area. One family decided to let people come into their child's home where they had been killed, and and to be able to see what it was like in their last moments there. And they put a guest book there for you to also sign and leave a message for the family, like, or a wish, or or support. So as you go through and you see this, like, you know you're just, so this was the house where Sivan and Naor had been killed. The family created sort of a museum of sorts where you could come in and see what it is they went through, get a sense of their lives, see a little bit of like what was there before, their last WhatsApp messages, um, you know, and where they were in their safe room, where they were for those hours before
Yeah.
they were killed. So, this was the walkthrough, and it was really really important. I felt like for me to go and to see this, see the border like right outside as we drove through. Um, Sorry, I think that stopped. Um, and I think that that was something that was really really meaningful. I'm just going to restart again because it just stopped for a second. But from there we went to Sderot, and in Sderot, um, so I don't know if you remember, but there were a lot of pictures of these painted um, kind of protective places where people go when there's a rocket attack in the south. They don't have that much time to get to a shelter, and they've been painted to create a sense of like not just having a cement block in the middle of the street. So they've been painting them to make them look different. And a lot of them that have been painted, you see them in videos where people had gone in and been killed afterwards. So, but this is in Sderot. Sderot was mostly evacuated. Sderot was a little bit of a different story. They didn't go into people's homes. Instead, what they did was they just went around the streets, shooting civilians on the street. And so, if you know the story of the elderly who were in a bus on their way to a trip to Yam HaMelech, to the Dead Sea, and they were picking up some people there, and they killed the entire busload of elderly on the streets of Sderot. This is the yeshiva of Sderot. It's a Hesder yeshiva. And
what is a Hesder yeshiva?
So it's a yeshiva where you, part of your mandatory army service, you fluctuate between studying and serving. So I think it's like 18 months studying in yeshiva, 18 months serving. I don't remember the exact
in the army, right?
Breakdown. But I went through the yeshiva. Of course, I couldn't help it. I had to go through and see everything. I went to see the Beit Medrash. Now they're back, and I spoke even to the head of the yeshiva, and he spoke to us. Wow, he's a short little guy who was talking with such bravissimo, and then afterwards, at the end of his talk, it was very crowded. I realized he'd been standing on a chair, because he was such a strong persona. You didn't realize he was a short little guy. Brought everybody back. He's having soldiers also using part of the dorms that are empty for them to be able to stay in. I took a picture from the top, and I went up to the roof. They took some rockets that had been fired at them and built art. Like there's a tree there made out of remnants of a rocket. There's a menorah there made out of remnants from rockets.
Wow.
And that have been fired at Sderot. This is the view, 360 degrees all the way around. They had seen the infiltration of the terrorists from this view up top. And one of the things he said, you see this view? You see this view? Well, soon you won't be able to see this view because we are coming back and we're building and we're continuing to build up the city. And before you know it, you won't be able to see the view because it's going to be packed. So he has a sense of like everyone should come back home. And
Devorah, living in Sderot, obviously the question on your mind would be, how is security different today than on October 7th?
Well, they're filled with, soldiers and so on there. But when I'm taking you to this picture, this is what happened in Sderot. The terrorists took hold of the police station, this beautiful, advanced, developed police station, and they took, hostages. They basically went into the station and were using the top of the roof as well to shoot anyone who tried to come near. And they held this police station hostage with hostages in it for a long time until they realized there were no longer any hostages in there or hostages were alive, and they bombed this to the ground. So what you see here is a lot that once had a police station there, and the sniper on the roof, the terrorist sniper, was stopping anyone from getting near to be able to put an end to this attack. And a guy took a gun, a handgun. He went up to the second floor of this building across the street, went into someone's apartment, poked out his gun from there, and shot the sniper from that second floor apartment. It's part of like the heroism you hear about.
Crazy
all the
stuff.
People, the heroes.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah, this had been a fire station next door to the police station that had already been moved elsewhere. So it was empty during that time. And
Devorah, what's amazing is the planning that the terrorists had gone through in order to destroy as much as possible. They were very, very well planned, weren't they?
Yeah, there was a lot of planning involved. There were people in the yeshiva on October 7th, and they don't know why they didn't go into people's homes there. They acted a little bit differently in the city than they did in the yeshuvim. And then from there we went to the Zikim, which is an army base today, and there was a very big battle in Zikim on October 7th as well. I think that went on for many days. And they showed us sort of where they were, where they had been fighting, as you could see here, a lot of the shooting that had been perpetrated against the base. And here is the exit where the tanks and the vehicles go into Gaza.
Devorah, from your understanding, I mean, as you said, there was a basis, an army base in the exact area where the terrorist attacks were taking place. From what you understand at this point in time, did that army base respond quickly and well? Were they shell shocked? The narrative out there is the question is, where was the army? And in this case, the
Yeah,
army was right there. How did they respond?
I'm not an expert on this.
Yeah.
Nobody is. Nobody has clear answers right now. I really don't feel like I can answer that.
Oh,
I think that
fair enough.
that's questions. Those questions are so important that they be answered. That uh, the branch of the army that essentially is in charge of the government that's in charge of investigating government offices already started the investigation a few months ago. And they said, "Why are you doing this? First, let's finish the war, then we'll investigate." And I said, "No, we're already collecting certain files, data, information. The investigation already started because those questions are really
But
important for us to know."
on the ground, is there not a narrative that people are sort of harboring at this point in time? Very
Depends who you ask. Um, it depends what region, what area. Um, some places, for example, the army used to not let soldiers bring guns home when they would be home for the weekend. So there was full entire communities where they had no way to defend themselves, and they had a locked box of weapons at the entrance to the kibbutz. And this is what we saw in Be'eri, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But to get to that locked box meant being sniped or killed on your way, and they didn't really have any weapons. I think there was one community that had no weapons at all. Not one civilian bullet was shot the entire time. And they were massacred for days.
okay.
So,
Take us to your next trip.
okay. Okay. So then the next trip that I made, and I was telling you a little bit about that, was a Nativa Asara, which was like right on the border. I told you it's also where the border crossing is. Be'eri, which everyone knows was was very badly hit. A lot of terrible massacres there. And then Re'im, which is where the the Nova
Right.
music party was. Okay.
Right.
Now, I think the day we went down was 120 days to October 7th. And there were many family members who came to Re'im, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But essentially, like they kind of went as like a memorial to be there at that
To their
on that day.
children, right? Yeah.
Yeah, children and so on. So once again, like as I was going through, I kind of realized once again like how beautiful and green it is, and wow, I was just like I was just blown away by that. And so like here, was when I got to the south, and we had went into Nativ Asra, and I told you beautiful homes, beautiful homes. No one is living there right now. You can see parts of the roof that were fell off, that were shot at by rockets. So they were, it exploded. There were pieces all over the ground. And this is the border from where we were standing. That's the border right there. Like, and he watched those parachuters glide over the border, and they went up to their window, and it was facing that border, and he tried to stop them. One of them got over, and he later found out, that they had gone to one of his neighbors, and they you can see the window here. So he would go, not this one, this is the cross street. This window, like this was windows facing the border, and he and his son and the neighbor who had a gun, each of them not many bullets, kind of positioned themselves up there to try to defend the region. And as we were, going through it, he showed us the different parts of the. I mean, look at this, so beautiful.
Yeah, there's a
So
real
beautiful.
trade-off living in the South. On one hand, you're clearly giving up security, sometimes more times than others, but the ability to build gorgeous houses in cities and villages is really palpable. It's very beautiful down there.
So this was like the border crossing where they would help Palestinians from Gaza to come in and get medical care. It's called Nativa Shalom. This was the crossing where they would come through, and they had bulldozed it and just come right in. And on October 7th, and there was terrible. You can see, like, I just kept taking pictures on my map to see where I was.
Yeah.
Like to get a sense of where I am. On the map, like here's the border, and that's where I am. And that blue dot. And I just was looking. This is they built it and they would put the dove on. I mean, they had peaceful intentions. Many of them always, were involved in bringing over these um, people for medical care. And then we walked through and we saw some of the homes. And, this was the home that was completely massacred. And you see still the sign of the family, the house sign, like with their name
Mm-hmm.
on it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like what's left, so
Total
once
destruction.
again, yeah, and beautiful, beautiful trees. And this was a rainy day. And then there was another house which they took us into. We only go into a house if we were given permission by the owners,
Yes. Yes.
obviously. And it was a little bit of, you weren't allowed to take pictures inside, but you just see, like, look, the tricycle at the front door, and the inside, the door is smashed, and we couldn't take pictures on the inside. But
I'm assuming
that
you're.
was
I'm assuming you weren't supposed to pick up anything and take anything with you. Did you take anything?
no, no,
No.
no, no, nothing, no, no, no. So, like, even here, I got a notification while we're there that there's a rocket attack and we're supposed to go into shelter. You have 15 seconds. I mean, we were in the bus. What were we supposed to do? There was nothing we could do. And that was it. We just kept going. So this is where Kibbutz Be'eri, the Be'eri, and the person who gave us a tour, his brother was killed. He said it was an ideal upbringing. He grew up there. His family was there. He said it was home. They all knew each other. He said life was ideal until October 6th. He said everyone was still riding their bikes, visiting their friends, and walking around outside and living that ideal kibbutz life. He said it was ideal. No one ever thought if you left it's because of a job in the center or something, but you didn't leave that ideal life out of choice. It was just their home. And for him, as opposed to in Kfar Aza, where the people who were taking us around were first responders, this was his home.
Yeah.
So he didn't really want to walk us through. He just wanted to tell us a story. So I realized at some point that he wasn't moving. He was just standing and talking. And that's what he needed. He needed to feel like he could tell the story. And then at some point he did start to walk us through and show us the different families and their homes, and who had lived there and what happened in that home. And I mean, you can see the homes are destroyed. And the question, we ask, of course, is what do you want to do with this? The kibbutz own these properties, this land. Do you want to rebuild? Do you want to create a museum? Do you want it to be, what do you want it to be? And they said, like, they're conflicted now, which is why they're not really doing anything. I just
Well, they're still in shock, right? It's very early on.
Yeah, I think they're in shock. I think they don't really know what they want to do with the area. Like, do you preserve it? Like, is that something you want to preserve, or is it something that you want to, rebuild on? Like, it's not Germany. It's not European land. Where Jews aren't going to live anymore. Like, Jews want to live here, right? Like, what do you do about that? How do you?
Yeah.
Um,
I think the
and
the
so
MO of the Jewish people is to rebuild. And I'm assuming that's going to happen with some parts left as museums. And I think that's probably appropriate, and that's probably what'll happen. Can we go to your trip in the north?
right. I just want to actually show you one thing at the end,
Yeah.
which we didn't, and I'm just going to go through Barry. But one of the things. By the way, this was an amazing story which they told us about this family that came from and saved these family. Like, there was people who got in their cars on the day of, drove south and saved people, and
Yes.
this house was one of those families who did that. They drove in, saved his family, and later visited them. But I just want to show you quickly the pictures of the Nova. Memorial, because that's really interesting to see. This was an elderly area. There's an elderly area in Barry. And just one second. I'm just going to take you quickly to to the Nova. Okay. So so then when we arrived here at the Nova Festival, you see also the sun setting through the trees. I mean, look at that.
Yes.
You see the sun setting.
Yeah, look at that.
I met some comedians who I know there who were on their way to do a show for soldiers, took picture.
Everybody's playing their role.
Yeah, that was their role. And then you come here and this is it. Everyone who was there has a memorial. And there were people going around and lighting candles. Lighting candles for these people. Many of them, there's the list of the names. This family was standing around. The grandmother, there was a father who was at the Nova Festival with his daughter in a wheelchair. This was the family, the grandmother. She came. She wanted to talk about it as well.
I think that's
people put, yeah.
It's a well-known story, that one.
Yeah. So this is the Nova Festival. And then we did, of course, the barbecue for the soldiers again. As I mentioned to you, one of the things about the barbecue was that, when we did the barbecue, we knew that they were going in to gather the next day. And many, we've been in touch with them to kind of keep in touch and see what, how they're doing. And, people who organize the trip, they know some of those soldiers. So, they know let's say the person who was the head of the unit. And so we have heard about people being killed, especially when recently about 21 soldiers were killed. Building, some of them had been from the barbecue we did after Be'eri. And I remember talking to everyone there. I tried to talk to all the soldiers. So that was difficult. But,
Devorah,
I
think one of the reasons that I had really never had an interest of going to Auschwitz is really because in my head, it's the idea of walking on that land and knowing what had happened there. And probably, hearing the screams of people and seeing them, that is something which would be very uncomfortable for me. Did you experience any of that in Nava, where the music fest was? It's not that long ago that hundreds of children young people were running for their lives. Is your imagination that fertile, or is that me?
I don't think I thought about it like that. I kind of was looking at. I always think about how I wish that people had thought bubbles over their heads, like so that you could know what they were thinking, because I could see these emotions on everyone's faces who were there. Who are you? Why are you lighting this candle? Who are you visiting? Were you there? Or is this someone you loved or knew? And you can't ask every person their story, but you walk around and you see all these living stories walking around. And so in my imagination, I keep trying to envision what that emotion on their face is about. Is it survival? Is it memory? Is it pain? Is it sadness?
Yeah, who are these people and where have they come from, right?
That to me was so real, seeing these people there. And at one point, a group of young guys who were there, I guess, from yeshiva, they just put their arms around each other and started singing.
Mm-hmm.
Like they needed to, it's such a powerful thing walking through those signs that I think there's a Jewish side to singing,
no question.
I don't remember what they sang, but
no question. There are 4 times in the Torah that a song is actually mentioned. And I always felt that's really something, that we are so moved by singing and song. Devorah, can you walk us through your trip in the north?
Yeah, so the north is a different story. And you mentioned about, the idea of evacuation. Like, how does a family feel? How do people feel being evacuated? And this is a little bit of a different story because we didn't believe that the north wasn't at risk. We believe that there was a vulnerability to the north. But because of October 7th, the vulnerability, we implemented that vulnerability onto the north. I'm not saying there's a war going on there. I mean, it's dangerous. But the idea of taking all of the residents of the north out of their homes is, I think, a very unprecedented thing. in Israel to take Jews out of their homes because there may be a risk. I don't remember Jews leaving their homes in Israel because there may be a risk.
And not everybody
Usually it was out of fear.
agreed with it, did they?
No, I think it was really tough for them to like leave their homes. And when you look at neighborhood like cities like Kiryat Shmona, which is a poor city, you have a falafel stand. What are you living on now? Like what are you doing? How are you going to come back to that falafel stand that probably has a million cats living in there? And like, how do you do that? Like, how do you do that to the families who like had jobs or whatever and children taken out of school? I mean, we saw what it was like in COVID when kids couldn't go to school, and many kids have been replaced in they've been placed in other areas across the country and so on. But I don't know, how do you do that to like entire
What
cities?
was interesting is when you were up north, you heard from a number of different speakers, including Brigadier General Giora Inbar, who he himself had a very difficult time with the idea of the evacuation, right?
Yeah, and I hope I'm not misquoting him, but I felt like there was something about this idea of saying, why as a country would we take people out of their homes? I felt like that was a unique position that I hadn't heard someone express so explicitly, and openly. Obviously there's a lot of doubt um, towards our government. There's a lot of doubt and a lack of trust, and so on and so forth. I can go on for a while. Uh, but to hear people say that, made me think a lot about it. I've been thinking about it a lot. It's a lot since then. But we went north for a different reason.
Yes.
So the government had said with the date that everyone will go back to the north to their homes will be in July. Recently, they moved it to September. I don't even know what those dates mean. Today, we have a conflict happening in the northern borders, and there's the day after. Day after, nobody knows when the day after will be and what it'll look like. But we have to build the bridge as people of hope and as people of building and innovation and of growth. We have to start building that bridge because we just have to build the bridge. We don't know what that day after will look like, but we know we need to start building that bridge. And part of building that bridge is providing support, whether it's remotely, whether it's off-site, whatever it is, providing the. Sorry, did I get disconnected?
No, you're still there. Keep on going.
Is providing the support that is needed in order for them to be able to maintain their businesses, their service offering, whatever they're doing, their startups, their companies, their families, and to keep that going. So that was what we did in the north, and I work for an organization that very much focuses on economic development, but we're super engaged in the north, and we went north that day to meet with all of our partners. So, universities, investors, service providers, all of that, kibbutzim, research institutes, all of that, and about 70 startups, good, high quality startups and investors who all came there to meet up together and to talk about the fact that we are coming back to the north. We're not letting them keep us out of the north anymore.
Yeah, that to me is very fascinating. That Israel, only 120 days out, is already planning for the future, and that I think is why Israel's considered the startup nation and so well respected in most parts of the world or many parts of the world for this mindset, and that's what you were part of, and I commend you for that. I think it's really brilliant that you took that trip, as well as your colleagues, other people who you did not know, to go there and say, okay, listen, things are bad. They're still bad. We're still at war, but we need to figure out where this is going to go in the future, how we're going to rebuild. And that I think is the mindset of the Israeli. And I think is the thing that makes Israel strong. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's also, as I said to you before, we've become a socially oriented, supported company. It's the people who are the leaders, the strong individuals. You heard stories of heroism, but the heroism doesn't stop. The families who are, continuing on with their lives. The all the different parts of the country that are supporting each other. And yeah, we need to keep doing that. So to me, that gives me hope, that gives me motivation to keep going, and that's kind of what we were doing. I just and the pictures now are very different than what I showed you in the south, because these are pictures of you know of reconnecting of. So by the way, that's the mountains of the north, coming into kibbutz Machanaim, going to the cafe there, meeting up with amazing people, who are all there with this, with the goal of supporting the startups. This is Dorbin, he's the head of the Innovation Authority in Israel. Meeting with startups. Like I said, people are there to support investors, donors, people who are part of this, this ecosystem.
It's
And what is,
amazing.
one of the common um, notes that people kept saying over and over, and I really tried to speak to everybody there. As we said, I'm a schmoozer.
You
I'm
are.
a good talker,
You're a
but
networker. Yes.
networker. But one of the things that everybody kept saying to me was, wow, I needed this. I needed to come out and meet with people in person. I needed to see people. I needed to meet with my partners, to meet with the people who are supportive of my startup, to give me hope again, to give me hope that, this is what we're going to do. This is where we're moving forward. And once again, I had to take a picture on my drive because of these mountains. Like, I pulled over to take the picture. Like, wow, it's unbelievable.
The
The
beauty
way
is
the
still
north
there.
looks. Yeah.
The beauty is still there. Devorah, I want to wrap up our interview here, and I want to do so by saying thank you so much for your bravery and your courage, for living in Israel, for sending some of your own children to the army. I often say on my podcast, we here in diaspora send our kids off to university. In Israel, you wait for that. You send them off to the army first, and therefore they might find themselves fighting for not only Israel, not only the Jews in Israel, but the Jews everywhere in the world. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for this report and for taking these trips. And I truly look forward to subsequent trips where you can report back to us on the, as I say, the matzav in Israel, because there's a lot of the situation in Israel. There's a lot of curiosity here as to how the Israelis are responding, what's happening now on the ground, what's next. And you alluded to some of that there are preparations that are currently happening. So Am Yisrael Chai, the nation of Israel lives and shall continue to live forevermore. And Devorah, thank you so much for this. I appreciate it.
Can I just wrap up with something as well?
Yes,
I hope that
please. Yep.
Well, I hope that the next time we speak, as I mentioned to you, that we're building that bridge to the day towards the day after, and I hope that I'll be able to share things that are happening on a positive level, on a positive note of how we're rebuilding, how our hostages are coming home, how we're helping families to rebuild and to reunite.
Good.
And so that's my hope and my blessing for us. So
Amen. You are listening to the Avrum Rosensweig show. I hope you got something out of it. Make sure to be part of the war effort on any level. Sometimes it's as simple as increasing or enhancing the goodness that you give out to the world. And make sure that you're cognizant of that and that you share that with your loved ones and friends. We will be back again soon, and we look forward to sharing with you more information about Israel and the Jewish world. Thank you very much for being here. The Avrum Rosensweig Show. It's a podcast with fascinating people who have inspirational stories to share with us. Thank you.